All right, in this explainer, we are diving into a really fascinating theory that connects some of history's most important spiritual figures in a way you've probably never heard before. It suggests there's a hidden pattern, a kind of physical signature that's been right there in front of us for thousands of years. I know, it sounds like the setup to a joke, right? But the source material we're looking at asks us to seriously consider a strange recurring link. We're talking about people who report these direct, life altering encounters with the divine, and then, later, describe these unexplained physical marks just appearing on their bodies. And get this isn't just from one time or place. The source connects figures from way back in ancient Israel, like Job with his boils, to early Christianity with the Apostle Paul's famous thorn, all the way to medieval Europe and even Pharaonic Egypt. Every culture had different words for it, but could they all have been describing the exact same core experience?
Okay, so let's get right into the central hypothesis here. This is where the source completely flips the script on how we might interpret these historical accounts of suffering. So the theory argues that these marks, the boils, the thorns, the lesions, they're not a punishment, they're not a test of faith or a disease like we'd normally think of it. Instead, they might be the literal physiological boundary, the very point of impact where divine energy intersects with human biology. I love this quote from the source because it totally reframes these marks. They're not something invasive or parasitic. They are an interface. They aren't a sign of something being wrong with the body, but maybe a sign of the body interacting with something far, far beyond our normal physical reality. And this just lays out the shift in thinking perfectly. On one side, you've got the standard historical interpretations: punishment, disease, maybe even a demonic attack. But on the other side, the proposed revision asks a radical question. What if history has been completely misinterpreting a sign of divine contact as a sign of damnation? What if the body changes simply because it was touched by God? So now let's actually look at the historical figures, the witnesses, and see how this pattern is supposedly traced across centuries, connecting people separated by vast stretches of time and totally different cultures. The argument is that this isn't just a handful of isolated events. It's a recurring phenomenon. This timeline shows a pretty clear thread, starting way back in the ancient world and continuing right on through to the early modern era. In each case, you have individuals reporting both a profound divine experience and these strange physical ailments. Now, look at the language here. Each culture used its own terms: sore boils, a thorn, scourges, lesions. The source suggests they were all just grasping for the right words, trying to describe the same, totally unprecedented physical experience that came right after a spiritual one. All right, now we get to the real linchpin of the argument: an anomaly from ancient Egypt. Because if this case holds up, it could make the pattern a truly universal phenomenon, one that predates the entire Judeo-Christian tradition. So let me introduce you to Akhenaten. This guy was a total revolutionary, not just in religion, but in art. Every other pharaoh for 3,000 years was depicted as this flawless, perfect god king. Not Akhenaten. He ordered his sculptors to show him as he really was, with all his physical imperfections, including these small pits that were carved right into his face on his statues. Now, Egyptologists all agree these marks were carved intentionally. The question is, why? The mainstream view is that it was just part of his obsession with artistic realism. Others think it could be signs of a medical condition. But there's a third, pretty compelling minority theory that says they are symbolic solar marks, a sign that he was physically touched and chosen by his one god, the Aten. And this is crucial. Conservation studies have confirmed that these marks were part of the original sculptures. They are not the result of erosion or damage or some later vandalism. They were carved there on purpose. Those pits were a statement. So here's the real kicker. If Akhenaten's marks are part of the same pattern we see in Job, Paul, and St. Catherine, it suggests this whole phenomenon isn't exclusive to one religion. It suggests that divine contact might have an objective, physical signature that actually transcends culture. And this brings us to what might be the most profound implication of this entire theory. If this pattern is real, it could completely reframe how we understand religious history, suggesting a single, unifying thread running through all of our diverse spiritual traditions. So often, we see religious history as a competition, right? The view on the left: only one culture got it right and everyone else was wrong. But this framework proposes a totally unifying view,
What if every culture just got a different piece of the same story? What if they're all just chapters in one long, unfolding narrative of divine communication? This idea actually has a name. It's called progressive revelation. The concept is that divine truth wasn't just dropped on humanity all at once, it was revealed in stages as we became ready to understand it. In this model, people like Akhenaten aren't false prophets, they're part of the same long story that later includes Moses and, according to the Christian tradition mentioned in the source, culminates in Jesus. So what should you take away from all this? It's a pretty radical idea, for sure. We've traced this pattern of divine encounters followed by physical marks across thousands of years. But what could possibly be the source of such a consistent phenomenon? Well, the source proposes that it's a single spirit, just called by many different names in different cultures. The Aten in Egypt, Sophia or wisdom in Gnostic traditions, the Holy Spirit in Christianity. The idea is that this one spirit is the common thread, the single source, behind all these similar patterns of contact and transformation we see throughout history. And ultimately, that leaves us with this final question. Is this all just a series of unrelated coincidences? A random collection of illnesses and symbolic art choices scattered across history? Or, as the source suggests, could it be a single, profound pattern hidden in plain sight this whole time, just waiting for us to finally connect the dots? That's the choice this theory leaves us with.